You can learn a surprising amount about wealth not from the people who flaunt it, but from the ones who quietly live next door, the ones you never suspect, the ones who mow their own lawn, drive an old sedan, and seem utterly uninterested in broadcasting their financial status. And that is where The Millionaire Next Door becomes less a book and more a revelation. It peels back the curtain on a hidden America, a world where millionaires are not celebrities or moguls, but ordinary men and women who built their fortunes through habits so unglamorous, so unremarkable, that society often overlooks them entirely. And yet it is in this ordinariness that the extraordinary is found. If you have ever met someone whose life radiates calm, not the loud confidence of wealth displayed, but the quiet confidence of wealth protected, you already understand the spirit of this book. Wealth, as the authors show, is rarely loud. It does not need to be. True wealth is not the shiny car. It is the freedom to replace it without worry. It is not the expensive watch. It is the peace of mind that endures long after trends fade. Real wealth lives not in display but in discipline, not in glamour but in restraint. And this is the heart of the story. The Millionaire Next Door invites you to walk through. Imagine a neighborhood where the person with the largest bank account is not the one with the biggest house, but the one who refuses to let lifestyle grow faster than income. A neighborhood where millionaires rise early, save aggressively, and invest consistently, where they treat money not as a tool for status, but as a shield against uncertainty. Their lives are not defined by extravagance, but by intention. They are proof that wealth is not an event, it is a process. A slow, patient, deliberate process shaped less by windfalls and more by habits practiced quietly over decades. But the most striking part of this book is not the data, it is the confrontation it forces within us. Because deep inside, many people believe wealth is synonymous with luxury. They confuse the symbols of prosperity with the substance of it. They assume the person driving the new luxury SUV must be wealthy, not realizing that many such individuals are drowning in debt, while the man driving the 10-year-old Toyota owns 3 rental properties and a portfolio that could weather a lifetime of storms. The book asks us to rethink everything we have been taught to admire. It urges us to question why we celebrate consumption and overlook the discipline that actually creates wealth. And when you trace the patterns of the millionaires next door, you begin to see that their success is not built on brilliance, but on behavior. They budget, they plan, they live below their means. They resist the gravitational pull of lifestyle inflation, the silent thief of long-term wealth. They understand that every dollar saved is not deprivation, but empowerment. And the empowerment grows over time, compounded not only financially, but emotionally. They learn to rely on themselves, to build a life independent of the unpredictable winds of the economy. What makes this story even more profound is the realization that wealth accumulation is deeply personal. It is shaped by values more than income, by choices more than opportunities. 2 individuals can earn the same salary, yet one ends life wealthy while the other ends life burdened. The difference is not luck, it is intention. It is the ability to say no when others say yes, to prioritize long-term stability over short-term validation, to avoid the temptation of measuring success by outward appearances. The book reveals a truth many avoid. Sometimes the people trying the hardest to look rich are the ones struggling the most, while the truly wealthy are too focused on freedom to care how they are perceived. There is a kind of dignity in this quiet wealth, a rare humility. Millionaires next door know that money is a tool, not a trophy. They use it to build futures for their families, to pass down values stronger than inheritances, to create optionality in a world that often traps people in cycles of fear and dependency. Their wealth gives them space, space to breathe, space to choose, space to live life on their own terms. And that, as the book beautifully suggests, is the real definition of wealth, autonomy. But every quiet fortune hides a story of discipline. Many of these millionaires started with little. They were first-generation wealth builders, navigating a world where nothing was guaranteed. They learned to stretch a dollar, to avoid debt like a contagious illness, to prioritize ownership over image. And these habits, once formed, became the scaffolding of their success. They built lives that were sturdy, lives that did not crumble at the first sign of hardship. Their resilience was not accidental, it was engineered. Yet beneath all the statistics and case studies lies a deeper psychological shift the book encourages us to make. It invites us to examine our relationship with money, not just how we spend it, but why we spend it. It asks questions that linger long after the last page. Are you buying to impress or to express your values? Are you spending to fill a void or to build a foundation? Have you mistaken consumption for success? Have you let society define what wealth should look like? And slowly, as these questions echo through your thoughts, a new clarity emerges. You begin to see that real wealth is the accumulation of choices that honor your long-term goals more than your momentary desires. You see that it is the small decisions made consistently and quietly that shape a fortune. And you realize that the things you once admired were often illusions, shadows cast by marketing and ego rather than genuine financial strength. The millionaire next door does not chase admiration. They chase stability. They chase freedom. They chase a version of life where money becomes a servant, not a master. And once you internalize this, your worldview shifts. You stop comparing yourself to people whose lives you don't truly know. You stop believing that wealth must be seen to exist. You start to trust in the power of the unseen, the savings growing in silence, the investments compounding slowly, the discipline shaping a life that may look modest on the outside but is profoundly rich on the inside. And then, almost inevitably, you start to imagine your own future differently. You begin to ask what habits you could adopt, what expenses you could release, what long-term vision you could nurture. You start to dream not of cars or watches or houses, but of mornings without financial anxiety, of choices unburdened by debt, of a life guided by intention rather than impulse. You begin to understand that the millionaire next door is not a rare anomaly. They are a possibility, a blueprint, a reflection of what becomes achievable the moment you redefine wealth, not as something you display, but as something you cultivate quietly through years of consistent, steady, humble decisions that slowly, gradually, almost imperceptibly transform your future into something sturdier, calmer, freer than anything you imagined during the years when you still believed wealth was meant to be recognized rather than quietly accumulated. And that single shift in perspective becomes the turning point where your financial life stops orbiting around appearances and begins anchoring itself in substance. Because the moment you abandon the need to look wealthy, you finally create the space to become wealthy. And this is where the second half of the journey begins, not in the numbers, not even in the habits themselves, but in the deeper psychological rewiring that allows those habits to take root. For the truth is, no one transforms their financial destiny until they transform the story they tell themselves about money. As you step further into the world the millionaire next door reveals, you begin to notice that real wealth builders share a trait far more powerful than frugality: clarity. They know what they want their lives to feel like, not just look like. They are not seduced by trends or pressured by social expectations because their internal compass is louder than the external noise. Their spending aligns with their values, not with society's scoreboard. And that alignment becomes the quiet engine driving their financial growth year after year. But clarity alone is not enough. The millionaire next door also possesses a rare form of emotional independence. They do not measure their self-worth against the possessions of others. They do not chase validation through consumption. They understand that envy is a thief not just of joy, but of wealth itself. And when you observe this emotional independence, you begin to understand why their financial lives are so resilient. They are not pulled off course by comparison. They are not seduced by lifestyle inflation. They are not trapped in cycles of debt fueled by the desire to impress people who are too busy worrying about themselves to notice anyone else. Their quiet wealth is not just a financial achievement, it is a psychological victory. And yet, none of this means their lives are austere or joyless. That is one of the great misconceptions this book dissolves. Millionaires next door are not misers. They spend, sometimes generously, but they spend with intention. Their purchases are aligned with their goals, not their insecurities. They buy things that offer utility or meaning, not fleeting status. And because they are free from the pressure to constantly showcase success, they experience a deeper, steadier form of satisfaction. A form of satisfaction rooted in autonomy, not admiration. This is the point where many readers begin to reevaluate the architecture of their own financial choices. You start to notice the subtle places where impulse guides you more than intention, where emotions dictate your behavior more than principles. You begin to see that wealth is not built in grand gestures, but in the accumulation of modest but consistent decisions. Cooking at home instead of dining out becomes not a sacrifice, but a strategy. Choosing a used car over a new one becomes not a limitation, but a declaration of priorities. Saving a portion of every paycheck becomes not an act of discipline, but an act of love for your future self. And as these realizations deepen, something else shifts. Your timeline expands. You stop thinking in days and start thinking in decades. You stop asking, how fast can I get rich? And instead ask, how can I build something that lasts? Because stability, not speed, is the currency of real wealth. And once you embrace that, your relationship with money becomes less volatile, less reactive, more grounded. You stop sprinting and learn to walk steadily, knowing that wealth built slowly tends to stay, while wealth built quickly tends to vanish just as fast. What makes The Millionaire Next Door so quietly powerful is that it dismantles the myth that extraordinary wealth requires extraordinary luck. It shows that financial independence is not a miracle reserved for the gifted few. It is a result available to anyone willing to master a handful of simple but difficult behaviors. Behaviors like discipline, restraint, humility, and long-term thinking. Behaviors that require no special education, no rare opportunity, no insider knowledge. Behaviors that transform ordinary incomes into extraordinary outcomes through the invisible force of compounding not just of money, but of mindset. And as you sit with this truth, you begin to feel the weight of possibility settle onto your shoulders. For the first time, wealth no longer feels like something distant or exclusive. It feels accessible. It feels personal. It feels like something you could build not by copying the lifestyle of the wealthy, but by copying their mindset. A mindset that honors simplicity over showmanship, consistency over excitement, and freedom over attention. But perhaps the most profound lesson comes in the final realization the book leaves lingering in your mind, that wealth is not measured in assets alone. Wealth is measured in control over your time, in choices you are free to make, in the absence of fear when the unexpected comes, in the ability to build a life shaped by your desires rather than dictated by financial pressure. The Millionaire Next Door does not chase money for its own sake. They chase the life money makes possible. And that, more than any number in a bank account, is what it means to be truly rich. Because in the end, real wealth is quiet. It sits in well-worn notebooks, long-term plans, steady investments, and modest homes with strong foundations. It sits in people who have learned to live with intention, with clarity, with a respect for the future that shapes every decision in the present. And once you internalize that, you cannot help but wonder what your own life might look like if you chose the quiet path, the path of discipline, the path of restraint, the path of freedom, starting with one small decision today, a decision that could eventually lead you toward a life far steadier, far calmer, far richer than the one you imagined back when you still believed wealth was something you needed to display in order to